Hupa. I'm Paris Wise, and thank you for joining the ICT Newscast. William Billy Kirkland has been nominated to be the next Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, a role previously held by Brian Newland. Kirkland, a Navajo Nation citizen, previously served as Special Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs during President Trump's first term. If confirmed, Kirkland will oversee the Bureau of Indian Affairs, managing federal programs and relations with tribal nations, as well as overseeing the agency's multi-billion-dollar budget. The Senate Committee on Indian Affairs will oversee the hearing, but has yet to set a date. Regular contributor Michael Stopp explains why he believes Kirkland is the right pick.
I think he's the right pick because he is the right confluence of both the Trump mindset and understanding the needs in Indian country. And you need someone in that position right now who can really advocate for Indian country, but also understands how the inner workings of the Trump world works.
We head now to northern Wisconsin to Lac Flambeau territory, where a road access dispute that started over a year ago is still unresolved. ICT's Marionette Pember joins us with the latest. Welcome, Marionette.
Good to be here. After more than a decade of failed negotiations over easements with property owners, the Lac Flambeau Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians in Wisconsin barricaded 4 roads in this vacation community, gaining international attention. Easements are granted by property owners, in this case the tribe, that allow others to use roads that cross their land. The barricade prevented about 70 homeowners from driving to and from their properties for 90 days in early 2023. Although the tribe ensured residents had access to food, medicines, and transportation to doctor's appointments, the closures attracted the attention of state lawmakers and national media. Homeowners complained that they were being wrongly punished for 19th century Indian land policy. Tribal President John Johnson said the town and title companies disregarded the tribe's sovereignty by failing to take negotiations seriously. Tribal leadership recently opted not to resort to barricades again after a judge ordered federal authorities to ensure the roads remain open. The dispute, however, has led to the possibility of land back to the tribe from the state of Wisconsin as a means to settle the disagreement. State, town, and tribal leaders are in the process of exploring this option. From the Lac Flambeau Nation, Marionette Pember, ICT.
Next, efforts to revitalize the Ojibwe language are getting a major funding boost. ICT's Stuart Huntington has the details.
The Wadu Kodading Ojibwe Language Institute recently landed a $1.5 million grant from philanthropist Mackenzie Scott. It will help fund a language revitalization center in Wisconsin's Lac Courte Oreilles Nation. Plus, the Bush Foundation this month joined the Midwest Indigenous Immersion Network's $8.2 million 8-year language revitalization initiative that includes teacher development. I asked the center's executive director why language revitalization is important.
Wind up itain dagwood mino in a tarnish na bemo the Banuji Ainsug, Mino Banujiag. Of course, it's important that our Indian kids start learning their languages. So many of our Indian students are in public schools and they don't always have access to language resources. We are very excited to be a part of this endeavor to finding a way to get more access to language to our students in public schools.
I also put the question to Dr. Anton Troyer, who's involved in both efforts.
Why do language revitalization? You do it to heal individuals, you do it to heal communities, you do it to build sovereignty, you do it to enhance economic vitality, you do it to keep our ceremonies and culture going. There's so many things.
From Ute Homelands, Stuart Huntington, ICT.
Across the country, supporters of Leonard Peltier are celebrating his release after nearly 50 years behind bars. Peltier was convicted of aiding and abetting the murder of 2 FBI agents. Earlier this week, I spoke with ICT's Kevin Abares, who was in Pine Ridge at a celebration of Peltier's return. Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us. As most of Indian country knows now, President Joe Biden, in one of his last executive orders, granted clemency, more specifically commutation to Leonard Peltier, which means he will be serving the rest of his sentence at his home. And you were actually recently able to attend a gathering that celebrated and reflected on his return. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So on January 25th, there was a gathering, a prayer celebration there at the site of where the shootout occurred that Leonard Peltier was involved in. This is near the community of Oglala, South Dakota, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Yeah, so this was probably maybe about 100 to 150 people were there for the prayer ceremony. You know, during the ceremony, the tribal president, whose grandparents actually owned the land where the shootout happened, spoke and talked about his sort of connection to the land and the fact that he had met the AIM activists who were there that day before the shootout. And then his cousin, Ivis Long Visitor, whose grandparents, who also has that connection, also spoke about his experience. Now, he was actually there on the property when the shootout occurred. He took his wife and 3 children and escaped the shootout. We call the place where the shootout occurred the old place. If you read about it in history books, they call it the Jumping Bull Compound. But I never heard it called that, growing up. It was only later when I started reading about that event that I heard it referenced that way. And, that was where we went to play as children, primarily. There's a creek that runs through the land, a very muddy creek. And so when I was young, we used to go there and we'd swim in the creek and have mud fights. A lot happened there on that land. Like my uncle said, I'll always think about those things and recognize and honor those things, as awful as they were. But a lot of good things have happened there too. And those are the things that I'll always remember about that land.
What was it like to then hear the news that he was being granted clemency? And what were some of those responses too from your family members as well as his family members that you grew up around?
So maybe it's partly because I'm so closely related to him, but my uncle Ivis had some really incredible words. He didn't speak for a long time, but what he says in my article that I quote is, a thing happened here. People fought for a way of life here. People laid their life down. Joe Stuntz left his body here. It was a tough day, but today we rejoice. Victory for Leonard for getting out. Wopi Latonka. There is power in prayer, my people. Yeah, I think most people have expressed the same things that my family expressed, which is, a great weight has been lifted. The fight to free Leonard Peltier has weighed heavily on a lot of people. A lot of people worry about Leonard. He's an old man now, and he hasn't had a chance to, sit with his grandchildren and as a free man. And he served 50 years, sometimes in some pretty desperate conditions at the various prisons he's been in. So yeah, I mean, there's been some other sort of division out there about the American Indian movement and how it treated women, especially. And that's very valid criticism. And I've heard that too. And there's no defending that, nor should we necessarily want to, So I feel the need to mention that as well, that, there have been people even within the Native community who aren't happy about Leonard being released. And I just wanted to recognize that as well. So.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
He ali'i ka aina he kawa ke kanaka. He ali'i ka aina he kawa ke kanaka. The land is chief, man is her servant. He ali'i ka aina he kawa ke kanaka. Our land is both a responsibility and a privilege.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau and the Pew Research Center, Native Americans marry outside their race more than any other group. In celebration of Black History Month, meet Lynn Hart, a man who wears many hats. He's African American, Nakota, and a cowboy. ICT's Shirley Sneevy has the story.
You're Yankton Sioux and African American. Now, how did that come to be?
My mom, she met my dad at Ellsworth Air Force Base back in the 50s. And I have 6 brothers and sisters I was adopted. I was placed in a foster home when I was 3 days of age in Chancellor, South Dakota. And once again, I didn't know, a town of 200, I call myself a flake of pepper and a salt shaker, right, being raised, And but nobody ever talked about me being darker than everybody else, and it was I was just part of it. And then the family that finally did adopt me, my foster mom, Elizabeth Alter, who's a Chancellor, passed away. And then they flew me to Washington, D.C. to meet the Hart family. And that was the first time I ever seen Black people. I was like, I started counting Black people going down Pennsylvania Avenue. And it was like, I got to about 200 and I quit. I was like, I didn't see I was like, got to remember, I was a little farm boy in Chancellor and never seen Black people before. But it's been a fascinating mixture, I should say, and raised in South Dakota by white people. So my mom says that I'm a chameleon, that I'm able to jump in the Black culture, the Indian culture, and the white culture, and become well-rounded that way. So, and not only that, I said too, I have 4 kids, and they're half German, quarter Sioux, quarter Black. There goes the neighborhood. So yeah, my goal is to bring people together, not apart. That's my dream.
How did you become a cowboy?
I was in the Marine Corps station in Yuma, Arizona, and I went to a bar one night, and there were these cowboys standing in the corner. They were rodeo cowboys, and they were talking about, oh yeah, what do you guys do? Well, we're bull riders, And I said, anybody can do that, I said, being raised in Chancellor, there was this old bull I used to ride all the time. His name was Ferdinand. For Mr. Hogershot was his name, but they used to put me on this herd bull, and I'd ride around as a little kid. I said, I used to ride bulls when I was 6 or 7. I says, what's the big deal, And they was like, yeah. So next thing I knew, they said, got me bull rope and hat and all this stuff, and stuck me on my first bull down in Tucson, Arizona, and I rode him. His name was Taipan from a Pook Hawkins string. And the bull stepped on me and broke my ribs, punctured my lung. They taught me how to ride it, but they never taught me how to get off. But I came back to South Dakota, and the very first professional rodeo I entered on my permit was in Oneida, South Dakota for Jim Sutton. And then I got picked up with an all-Black rodeo association called the Bill Pickett Invitational Rodeo out of Denver, Colorado. It was the only all-Black touring rodeo in the United States. I'm thankful. I ended up doing movies and became a stuntman, and just from being around people.
An ambassador. That's what you are. You're an ambassador.
Thank you. But I want to see great things happen. I'm here. I've been here. I've been living in Flandreau on this reservation for 16 years. I also portrayed York with the Bicentennial. I did the whole journey, paddled the Yellowstone, rode the keelboat through South Dakota, and I love that journey because it was a reconciliation between Lewis and Clark and the American Indians, all the tribes that they met. In the dream that Dr. King speaks so eloquently about being one, not well, I'm this, you're that, you're rich, you're poor. No. Let's just help each other out. And that's where we're at right now. That's what I want to do is help.
Across the United States, countless monuments honor European settlers and their legacy, but rarely do we see sculptures celebrating the land's original inhabitants. That just changed in one Michigan city.
They both just have a presence.
They stand at the shoreline of Lake Superior like grand monuments to competing ancient civilizations, profound statements about unresolved European colonization and indigenous history. The giant ore dock, which stretches out into the waters, is a potent symbol of a region and city founded on extraction, Nearby, a new sculpture, the Seven Grandfather Teachings, is testament to the Anishinaabe people's cultural and ancestral ties to the lands they have inhabited since time immemorial. The dock was built in 1931 and decommissioned in 1971, but it has long dominated the landscape and public story the city named for French Jesuit priest and missionary Jacques Marquette, who was commissioned in the 1660s by France to explore and claim the region for the French crown.
You have that old ore dock, which is basically a monument to colonization and history.
Today, a statue of Marquette dedicated in 1897 stands in the city's Father Marquette Park. But it wasn't until the September 2024 unveiling of the Seven Grandfather Teachings that a public monument marked the history of the Anishinaabe people. The creator, Jason Keegno, a citizen of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe of Michigan.
They're one of the oldest stones upon the earth. My thing is more, I try to bring up like the seven grandfathers, to bring them forward so everyone remembers that those teachings are there for us.
Those teachings? Love, respect, honesty, bravery, truth, humility, and wisdom. The sculpture has 7 large locally quarried stones composed of Kona dolomite and greenstone. To Jason, perfectly shaped by the earth.
There are these natural boulders that the earth had shaped. The earth shaped them. They, like the crust on there, the oxidization. In my view, the stones are perfect to begin with. I started at the age of 14. And so my tribe on the Saginaw Chippewa reservation, through the education department, they had a stone sculpture class. And a couple members, one of them went to school out at the Santa Fe Institute, and he took stone sculpture. His name was Dennis Christie. And his apprentice, who was also from our tribe but lived out there, they both came back to their home to the reservation. And, they started a class for us kids. And it was from age like 13, like high school. And there's 15 of us, and I was the only one who stuck with it.
Keegno's first creation was a turtle, and from there, the rest was history.
To transform that raw piece of stone into a turtle, I was amazed. I was like, holy cow, I can't believe I did this. And it just hooked me then.
At age 50, he's now a full-time stone carver.
What it comes down to for me personally is they find some type of peace and contemplation. I know what my purpose is to put our stories in stone.
He's currently working on the final piece of the sculpture, a fire that will stand in the middle of the grandfather stones.
I'm going to do 3 flames representing the 3 fires. So I'm going to try to get 3 different color stones. And one to represent the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa.
For ICT with Marionette Pember, Daniel Herrera Carbajal.
When a new administration takes office, a certain amount of change is expected. President Donald Trump campaigned on radical action, and we're seeing a lot of it come to bear. Today's roundtable looks at how tribes are facing financial uncertainty.
Amitakiapi, I'm Shirley Snavy, and I'm joined by 2 newcomers to the ICT Roundtable, and economics is our topic today. Brandi Liberty lives in New Orleans. She's from the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska and the Uinta Nation. Her practice specializes in tribal housing, economic development, grant writing, and strategic planning. And Jonathon Okuté Maza is Cheyenne River Sioux. He's the director at the Tribal Anti-Corruption League and the media and marketing director for the Next Level Communications. And thank you all for joining me. Things are happening so fast, it's seriously hard to keep up. But we'll do our best. Brandi, I want to start with you. You work with a lot of tribes that rely heavily on government funding to operate. What are you seeing on the ground?
Right now, a lot of our communities are trying to conserve try to understand what's happening out there. A lot of them have gone on tribal freezes for, making sure, they're not spending unnecessarily, the travel and hiring freezes and all of that, just so that we can conserve until we have a better understanding of what's happening. I've advised a lot of them, like, just stick to the game plan and prepare for the worst and hope for the best is about all we can do right now while we try to understand what's happening.
Jonathon, how do you see tribes balancing the need for change at a high level? I mean, I think we'll agree that the federal government isn't perfect, but still we have a trust responsibility that's guaranteed through treaties. How should we deal with this?
From what I've seen as far as economy in Indian country, we're dealing with the same old story, really, with budget cuts, fluctuations when it comes to a new administration, and that's the problem. Our security as nations is in the hands of these underfunded, mismanaged government programs that see us all as American Indians instead of hundreds of unique nations that we are as people, spiritualities, tribal nations. And it really is a wake up call. But the federal government has that trust responsibility that we talked about for our treaties, and that includes education, welfare, infrastructure, and that isn't going to change, not without repeals and proceedings through district courts across 576 territories. And then that'll go into the Supreme Court, and they will even have to go into trying to change treaty verbiage. So this is a good opportunity to focus on true community development. The BIA budget was 2.6 billion in 2015, and in 2024 it was 3 billion. So this number grows yearly, and yet we see in 99% of our tribes that we're still at the bottom of every social, health, and economic indicator in 2025. That hasn't changed. So it's time to cultivate this long form, traditional led these economies that we have across Turtle Island, across the United States. And this conversation about our complete reliance on the federal government and the funding highlights this perfectly. So we have the resources, the talents, the leaders, and the guidance to be our security. This is for 7 generations ahead. So what better time now than to start this conversation and start implementing it?
I think COVID was the first wake up call of changing times for our leadership within Indian country. They realized, hey, we could still work in our traditional ways, but we have to navigate into technologies and things like that help serve us. We had to continue to function, and people were first forced to work from home. And I saw COVID as a positive change for Indian country, because we did have that shift when everyone is so afraid of change. And now this is, like Jonathan was saying, this is the wake up call. This is the real life. I have been telling my communities for years, we always see a slight shift in any change of administration. And I said, this time around, guys, it's going to be worse than that. And this is how we need to prepare for it. This is what you should expect. There's a reason we diversify funding sources. There's a reason why we continue to build our capacity. And you now need to follow that plan that we laid out.
Brandi, one of the things that you're talking about really is private sector economic development and that individual spirit of entrepreneurship. Jonathon, are you seeing more of that in your work?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think this whole situation is, and even COVID really started this. Was showing Indian country that we have the ability to have our own business. Right now, it's really hard in Indian country as far as on our reservations, our economy is not there. So we have to really work with our tribal councils to start implementing our own constitutional amendments to make sure that our economy can start growing. Right now, there's a lot of red tape. So we need to think about, creating a foundation to build businesses physically on our reservations.
Let's talk about what's going on that's positive. I mean, are you guys excited about anything that you're seeing, Brandi?
At the tribal level, we are now forced to come together as a community again, just like during COVID. Like we have to rely on each other. We can't have this lateral violence, and intertribal lateral violence. We've all got to come together and have a common consensus. I mean, I work with hundreds of tribes across Indian country. Every single one of them has a lot of the same issues. And this is a great time for us to come together and build that foundation to stand up for our sovereignty, our self-determination, and make a positive difference, in what we want to see within our next 7 generations and our current communities.
And Jonathan, what about you? Are you seeing anything positive?
Oh yeah, I'm seeing a lot of positivity in our communities. I know we're worried, but out of that worry comes education, and out of education comes the foundation of our true movement, which is sovereignty, the self-determination. We have treaties protecting us, but we do need to be prepared, obviously, for everything. And yeah, like I said, education will help us prepare for that, and that's what this is open up to. And that's the positivity that I've seen, is everybody willing to step up, read their treaties, read their laws, and ready to stand behind our true traditional leaders.
Well, we'll have to leave it at that, but I want to thank you both for this wonderful conversation. So joining us today, Brandi Liberty from New Orleans and Jonathon Okuté Maza, now from Minnesota. So thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
guys. Have
you.
a great day.
To watch the full conversation, head to our YouTube channel or visit our website at ictnews.org, where you can stay up to date with all the latest. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.